Coogs House. Watched it again, and no, it didn't get any better the second time.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, a podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you've gotten your Houston Blue merch yet ahead of the Baylor game this weekend, the blowout game of sorts, I appreciate you each and every making your first listen. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, though, from last weekend's Arizona debacle, to say the least. In this one, I want to talk some about constant question that's going to be surfacing all weekend about where some blame should go. I want to do the normal GOATs versus GOATs segment we've kind of incorporated here each and every day. But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and that we're going to start with just what all happens as you watch a football game a second time. Now, sometimes, and I will say with my coaching hat on, again, teacher and coach by day, the film is generally, once you know what happens at the end of it, never as good as you thought it was and never as bad as you thought it was live, right? That's just kind of a general, it's very coach speak, but it's very true. Those mistakes, some stick out more, some stick out less, but they don't necessarily, like the game is, you always felt more emotional about it right in the moment after. In this one, I guess in sticking with that, I had left the game on Friday night frustrated with the defense. Arizona was averaging like less than 22 points per game against a fairly simple and easy schedule, had lost 5 in a row. Houston gave up 27, and I didn't think Arizona had a whole lot of threats offensively outside of McMillan. And Houston has such good DBs, I kind of thought they could cover that up pretty quickly and easily. It's not quite what happened, clearly. Houston gave up 27 points. Now, on the whole, I will say offense put them in a couple bad spots, didn't support them, didn't play complimentary football. On the second watch, I think I was thinking that they got run through and run over because of the way they were playing at the end, but they played a lot of snaps over the course of the game, and that I think adds up to some of that as well. Some of those big gashing runs were later in the game with all that having happened, and so defense, I'll fully admit, was not as porous as I thought it was, although it could have been better. Obviously, 27 points is not great. No Fafita and Tory McMillan were really good. I thought that Fafita also did a good job of utilizing checkdowns at tight ends and stuff like that. When Houston did cover up the deep stuff, they practiced too. The offense, however, I think was exactly as bad as I thought it was on Friday night. Third game this season without a touchdown, and if you throw out the UNLV garbage time touchdown against third string guys, really their fourth. It's not great. Needless to say, they've lost those 4 games. That's 4 of the 6 losses on the season. I think you can extrapolate it out actually and look at if they score more than one touchdown, like a second touchdown, they typically win the game this season. The lone, I guess, example of that not happening is Kansas off the top of my head. And that those 2 touchdowns kind of came in a weird spot in that game. But like Utah was just 17 points. Kansas State was just 24 points. TCU, I guess they got to 30, but I digress. The goal here is scoring 2 touchdowns apparently, and that could not happen on Friday night. Jameer Burnett, I didn't really put together the night of. He doesn't come back in the game, I don't believe, after his second fumble that Manjack falls on. I don't know if that's – I think that's just him working down the depth chart because he had a couple of early fumbles as a freshman. Just kind of adds the allure, like where is Parker Jenkins that far down the depth chart that we're going to bench guys for fumbling but not bring him back? People have asked me that question, and all I bring him up to say is that I don't know. I do know that Rashawn Sanford played really well. On the second watch, it was probably even better than I realized. And so some of that, I think, is other guys stepping up. I don't know the full story there. If you got it, would love to hear it. the biggest thing I think about looking at the offense in the second watch is that it simply did not appear to be the kind of an offensive game plan that Houston had extra days to prepare with, meaning that did not look like the kind of game plan where Houston has, a few extra days the week before, and then they played on a Friday, so it's like one less day on that week, but you had the full week in the bye week. Even if you give yourself a rest day or two to kind of get your body healthier, that's still like a lot of time to get prepared for this game. And Arizona's not doing anything too crazy defensively. They've I don't want to say they're completely untalented. They were preseason picked in the top 5 of the conference, but this was not the best defense Houston's played really in the last month, let alone this season, and really just did not look prepared for it. I saw people talking online like they almost took the game for advantage. The kind of the talk going into for 2 weeks now was, you got 3 games to win 2 to get to a bowl. Arizona had lost 5 in a row. Kind of felt good about that one, but instead, the offense laid a gigantic egg for what really was the second consecutive time you had a bye week to do so, which kind of raises questions as far as like, I think they're valid questions. What is going on in the preparation of the bye week, and especially on the offense side of the football? Like, what are you thinking you're doing? Because the defense, I think, was better this bye week than they were the previous bye week when they came out and played Kansas. So, what's happening on offense? I think raises some questions. I think there's lots of people having questions with the offensive coordinator and those kind of things. And I will say that while I've got my critiques, I think it's also easy to go to that when there's other things going on too. I do think he does some things that I'm questioning. The third down stuff still is baffling. I went through it on Friday Night Live after the game, but they continue to run the ball on 3rd and long, and it continues to not work. It's not deceiving anyone. It almost feels like you're just playing not to turn it over and then punt. And while the offense is stuck in the mud, I don't think it's quite that dire. And speaking of dire, speaking of running, the goal line play, when you're watching it on the second time, and I guess I opened the segment saying it's never as bad as you thought, never as good as you thought. That single stand, or like the defense made the stand, but the single goal line possession for Houston actually did feel worse on the second watch. And I think that's mostly because of you kind of know it's coming as the play is building up. So what you get there is a relatively long drive, honestly, at least in terms of yardage. You have a couple of big runs. Zeon Chriss busts for 21. Rashawn Stanford gets off for a pretty good size run of 38 that kind of flips the field. Frankly, I thought there was a chance, even though I knew he didn't, I thought there was a chance that Rashawn Stanford was going to score as he runs it the second time I watched the game. And you get down inside the 10. Your first play from inside the 10 is an 8-yard run. I mean, things are clicking. It's only 7-0. It's a crucial moment of the game. And you bring in Donnie Smith to run something with the quarterback. And I want to stress, I don't hate bringing in your backup quarterback, especially when they look like Donovan Smith, big, strong, etc., to come in and run the football. I mean, he's listed 6'4", 6'5" on different sites. He listed 245 on some. He's a big, strong guy. So you think he can fall forward for a little bit extra space. Also, the thought about your backup quarterback is like if they take a ding wrong on their shoulder and get a stinger, that's fine. Bring the starter back in. You don't have to have him throw it at all, right? And also those signals to everyone that you're going to run the football, right? So the defense is lined up for it. And then, frankly, even if after all that, you're going to tell me we're going to line up the shotgun, I'm not necessarily upset yet. You can run a sweep, you can run outside, run an RPO, right? There's other things you could do out of the shotgun that are better out of the gun than under center. Sure, I get that. But to line up in the shotgun with your backup quarterback and to then just run up the gut with him is just flat abominable. It's just terrible. If you're going to run the tush push with a guy that's 6'5", 245, run the tush push. Again, if they'd have gotten stuffed on the tush push with Donovan Smith in, I don't think there'd have been any complaints. If they'd have gone from the gun and not run the tush push, the complaint would have been like, well, why didn't you run that, right? Or why didn't you have Chriss in for that throw or whatever, right? It just, and I know that that was only third down. The fourth down play after that was an incomplete pass, but it felt like the kind of gut punch that just wasted a great drive that would have tied up the game before that. And that doesn't help that. So your defense gets 3 and out there. And then your offense, the next possession, throws an interception. And it just adds to this, back and forth of bad football when you had a chance to tie it up and kind of take advantage of some things. I want to talk about goats and goats and goats of the game in a second. And we'll talk more about all the highs and all of the lows more. But before we get too far, I know I need to pick me up on a Monday morning, especially after a weekend like that. And if you do too, the folks over at 5 Hour Energy are here to be your friend. They know that being a passionate football fan is not just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, and agonizing second overtime. If only we got to overtime. That'd be great. Now, I know that last weekend we all need a little bit of energy, especially to get through the late night game. I will tell you right now, I wish I had the empty next to me. I used a 5 Hour Energy that afternoon to get me ready for that night. 5 Hour Energy knows no matter who you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. And that's why, whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That is why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot, which tastes really good, by the way, is here to help you keep fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy, available at 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. All right, Parker Andrew here, the Locked On Coogs, talking goats and goats of the lost Arizona in Tucson on Friday night. The way we do this is capital GOATS, the acronym for greatest of all time, a very youthful slang for doing well. And then goats, like the scapegoats, that would have been the way, like, oh, what a goat, or whatever back in the day would have been a bad thing. And so a capital G goat, for example, I'm going to try and stay positive here, is Keith Cooper. Keith Cooper continues to show why he's going to be a pro defensive lineman. 6 quarterback pressures and a sack at 3 other tackles, really dominated his side of the line of scrimmage. So much of I want you to pay attention, go back and rewatch this, where they're running the football afterwards at the end of the game and trying to run out the clock. Really impressive. The inverse of this, the lowercase g goats, the scapegoaty kind of people of the game. I'm really kind of just going to put a position on this because I want to throw college kids named under the bus, and there's more than one. The edges of the offensive line were bad all night long. The pressure was a lot. There were 18 total pressures, meaning someone disrupted the play in the quarterback, either a hit or a sack, or takes him off his mark, forces a scramble, whatever, right? 18 total pressures. Only 3 of them came from interior defensive linemen. Only 3 of them came from the inside. That's 15 pressures of the quarterback coming off of the edge. Now, admittedly, some of that could be play calling. There's no chipping of tight ends, or not chipping of the right tight ends, because I don't think they played particularly well in the blocking stuff. Chipping of the backs, we've seen that go wrong in the past too, though. On the whole, right, the edges of the offensive line struggled. For what it's worth, they also were not great in the run. The run game was more successful between the B gaps, including like Rashawn Sanford's 38-yard run. Now, he did break that off and cut some out. Like, stuff falls out sometimes, but it starts between the B gaps typically. And it really cost him. For example, we'll talk about this with a later goat as well, but the tricky play, the double reverse pass play, where I think ultimately Zeon gets sacked. Right, he might have thrown an intentional incompletion on that, but ultimately he gets sacked. Right, bad play, tricky play, whatever. There was an open Boogie Johnson behind the defense on that play. You can see it in multiple angles of the replay, but Zeon cannot set up the throw on the relatively long developing play, admittedly, because of edge pressure. That continues to be a plaguing problem for this offensive line. We've got to continue to find ways to successfully pass the football without worrying about the edge. Going back to capital G goats, good side of things. because that's enough of the negative. I'm going to say AJ Haulcy. AJ Haulcy continues to look like an MVP of this team. He played every single defensive snap of the football game, all 70 snaps, 4 tackles, 2 assists. He only allowed 1 catch on him. And I think, based on my stat here, he gets targeted 4 times. Safeties can be hard to watch on that, admittedly, because sometimes they're in help, sometimes the primary defender, who knows, right? I had him down for having been targeted 4 times, only giving up 1 catch, and it was a 5-yard catch. And he also broke up a much deeper pass and a pass breakup. And so pretty strong performance at AJ Haulcy. He obviously, whenever he lays a tackle, is a pretty big hitter too. Really continue to be impressed by him this year. And he's another guy that feels like he's going to play on Sundays, which is, for a season the way Houston's going right now, I think kind of shocking to people on the outside. But AJ Haulcy looks like a pro. The other lower G goats I've got, again, another group, because I'm not singling out kids' names necessarily, but whatever corners were covering Tatori McMillan on a given play, I felt like while Tatori McMillan is admittedly probably a first-round pick in the NFL draft this spring, and that's not just me saying it because he beat Houston so bad. He is that kind of good, right? It's a very wide consensus as one of the 3 best receivers in college football. Some people might put him as second, some people might put him as first, some people might put him as third, but no one's got him lower in the top 3. It just felt like Houston was relatively unaware of where he was at various points in the football game, which just can't happen with him. And it felt like corners they thought they had help here, or didn't know they had help there. Like, corners just seemed to be on the wrong page with it. And with how well coached the defenses looked at different times this year, and this admittedly maybe giving them too much slack. And I guess that's not the case, we give it to them. I just have a hard time believing that there were not coaching points and finding for Tatori McMillan on every single play, right? He's that demanding of an offensive weapon, and I don't know why Houston let him get loose like that. Now, I'm not saying that he had his best game ever. He's obviously, like I said, a future pro, and for what it's worth, like 70 yards and a touchdown is not like emphatic, right? It's just good. But he really was kind of all they had coming into the game. I know in this game they had a receiver go for, I think it was a receiver, might have been Chris Hunter. I think he was a receiver. He also had 65 yards, right? And so I think I think people said well, he was really good. He was really good. But like, on the whole, you come into this game, if we can keep McMillan under 50 yards, we're all right. They could not. They were not. I think it's on the corners, but I'd be open to hearing otherwise. Capital G GOAT, speaking of passing game, hats off to Boogie Johnson. Stephon Boogie Johnson had 4 catches, should have been 5 or more. He had 70 yards. It should have been at least 80. I think he catches the fake punt pass, but they just didn't call it on the field, and so the replay kind of screwed him there. Frankly, you could also argue like some of his deep shots, the deep targets could have been a little bit better throw, and he could have maybe reeled those in. The biggest deal to me about Boogie was how he made his catches over the middle, crushing blows. I think one of them could have gotten the defender a penalty. Really tough catches for a guy that's known for his speed and footwork was really impressive to make. I also point out again that he was open on the tricky play, the double reverse pass, and probably scores a touchdown with a good ball thrown there. Can't happen because of other things, but again, that's an impressive wide receiver game. He's my MVP, locked on player of the game, so he'll be getting $100 in his NIL account through Roy. Return on you. I'll tell you more on that one on Tuesday, but that's who I'm sending my locked on player of the game to. If you're here this far, tell me in the comments down below who you send yours to. And then it's hard not to give, a lowercase G GOAT to the quarterback when the offense scores just 3 points. Zeon Chriss, that's you this week, Parts. I like Zeon's game a lot. I love running quarterbacks. I think that adds a dynamic to the game that, really is hard to put a value on. He had the big run right the series we talked about before when Donovan Smith only got stuffed on the goal line. And I think his legs were a weapon in this game. But 16 to 27 with the pick, and the pick was bad. pick was bad. And it just seemed like in this game, the first read was pretty consistently taken away. And he'd get to the second and get to the third. And I don't think this was the kind of game where it looked like the Houston receivers were just not open. It didn't look like to me he had like nowhere to go or anything like that. If anything, I think I anticipated him having some chances to throw the ball deep. And he did, and he either didn't take them or overthrew guys. And average depth of target, A dot was 10 yards, which is fine, but it's not good enough to warrant a 59% completion. And it's not like he was just throwing bombs and hoping for the best, right? I mean, 10 yards is a long but routine throw. It's not the dump off the flat or whatever, but it's a routine throw. I had him down as a drop. Stacey Sneed on one. That's also what Pro Football Focus had. Even if that's completed, that's just 63% completions. That's not good against what was a bad defense. Arizona's defense is really a weak unit this year. They gave up 39 points to New Mexico, 31 points to Kansas State, 28 points to Texas Tech, 41 to BYU, 34 to Colorado, 56 just 2 weeks ago to Central Florida. So I think this was the kind of game where like it's all about why couldn't Houston get more in the end zone. I feel like the pressure got to Zeon a little bit, like the pressure from like the pass rush pressure, not the pressure of the moment. And once you kind of get gun shy on that, it's kind of hard to come back from that in the game. Now, I hate doing this next part, the third segment, talking about the refs, but a lot of conversation over the weekend about it with different fans, and I want to make sure we get on the same page here. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, you put down $5. If that hits, you get $150 back in bonus bets if it wins. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. You get a hunch in the middle of the game. Check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. The same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com. Join today. Get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports partner of the NFL. Also, want to tell you about our buddies over at Game Time. Best place to get last-minute tickets at lowest prices, guaranteed. If you're trying to get into the Baylor game this weekend, I think it's pretty affordable, but I know it's the most affordable on Game Time. They got all kinds of great deals, last-minute tickets, last-minute zone price deals, etc. I like that the lowest price guarantee. So if you find tickets, and you find tickets in the same section row cheaper somewhere else, Game Time will credit you back 110% of the difference on the app. So right now, you can go take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time Picks. They give you the best value assessment of picks in the stadium. I'm telling you right now, you get in the lower bowl, all things in, all prices included, for less than $50 a pop. It's frankly, I think, on the way down. So go check out Game Time right now. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to play again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Park Ranger Locked on Coogs. You're doing the segment I always hate to do, but people just kept talking about it all weekend long, and that is blaming the refs. People were upset about the refereeing in this game. Houston loses 27-3. Naturally, the refs must be a 25-point difference. Now, I don't mean to be super facetious in this one, but Houston gets called for 4 penalties for 39 yards. Arizona just 2 for 30. And I don't think every penalty is necessarily the ones they're talking about. If I'm thinking through what people are talking about on this one, I'm assuming people are going with thinking the refs screwed Houston out of a victory or whatever, are the Mekhi Muse punt return and the Boogie Johnson aforementioned in the second segment drop/not drop fake punt pass, right? And so I just have a hard time going through blaming referees in a game where simply Houston did not play anywhere close to well enough to win. If they played close to well enough to win, I could hear it. If they did play well enough to win, I would really hear it. If they played more than well enough to win and got really screwed, that would be the first thing I've said on every episode since. But That's just not the case in this game. Houston's offense was stuck in the mud, abysmally slow. It was as bad as they've been all year. On the Makai Muse run, though, I will say, to the letter of the law, while it was a like by the rule textbook kind of holding on the punt return, the thing I think Houston fans are upset about is that it's not kind of the way the rule is called most often. And by that, I mean that typically, what you see, if you're new to football, new to the school, whatever, didn't see the game, typically you call holding when it changes the outcome of the play. So if I'm running off the left edge and a slight hold happens for a half second off the right edge, it goes off, right? If it's a pass play downfield and there's a holding on the left sideline and the ball is like completely thrown to the right sideline, there's nothing there, it's almost never called on the left sideline, right? So the offense to kind of avoid those kind of things, of the defense kind of to force that at the point of attack. The other part of that too is that when you see on special teams, when the ball is like just so far away from the play happening and it's just very incidental and short, you almost never see it called. There was a half second, like not even, on the Makai Muse punt return that involved a holding along the way. I get why Houston fans are upset that was called. It was far away from the ball. I'm not sure it really had had any impact on the outcome. And by the like spirit of the game, I don't know that I'd always call that one. But I can't say it wasn't a hold. I can say it probably shouldn't have been called, but I can't sit here and tell you it shouldn't have been called. And further, while Houston was down a touchdown when that happened, it's not like Houston didn't have chances to score later. They did, right? And they didn't score. Spoiler alert. The other one I think people are really harping on is that Boogie Johnson catch. So if you weren't paying attention, I believe it was 4th and 3. And Houston opted to put the punt team on the field, but instead of the punter, who wears number 91, they put a 4th or 5th string quarterback in. Holman Edwards wears number 1991. Would throw people off a little bit, I think. But moreover, which is a jersey number that I think, honestly, most people on the Wildcats didn't think. It wasn't like they put Donovan Smith or Zeon Chriss back there, even OELA, right? They didn't put someone that I think the defense would have been prepared to see throw. And he wheeled back and threw it. It was called incomplete on the field, looked really close. They went to review and ultimately said that the call stood, which meant that they did not confirm it, but the call stood. And I sit here and think that was going to stand because the replay gets super blurry when you're zooming in as close as they had to. I think it was always going to stand with whatever they called on the field. I thought he caught it. I'm not an unbiased observer. I thought he caught it. But at that point, Houston was also down 2 touchdowns, and they're running fake punts because they're having enough trouble on offense getting the ball more than 3 yards. Like I understand people being upset about that kind of stuff and feeling screwed because I don't think that they were the right calls. But I also I can't look at this game like, well, that was it. That was the whole thing. That was the 24-point difference. Houston played bad, and they played really bad on offense. Good news is they are not out of bowl contention. They have 2 weeks to go. They got Baylor at home for senior night and Blue Day this weekend at 6 o'clock. I am actually going to be at a wedding during that game, so we'll see how covering that one goes. But regardless, that's an important football game for this program. Fall weddings, man. When the people you care about, you got to go to them, but they can be rough. Also saying that as it is a blue out, we're doing all kinds of things with blue here at Locked on Coogs fairly regularly this week, so make sure you check that stuff out. We'll see what kind of things we end up doing for that one. They also, what's worth after the blowout game, will then head up to BYU for a team that is surprisingly beatable, has an offense that gets stuck in the mud sometimes of their own, and that game, if they can beat Baylor, beating BYU in Provo after Thanksgiving, could open up the rest of the season. It's nice to be playing meaningful football at the end of it, and Houston still has a chance to do that with a pair of opponents that, honestly, as good as BYU's defense has looked this year, their offense hasn't. I think they got chances with both. I always talk myself into a win by Friday anyway. You know that one's coming, but we'll do that. We've got book club later today. We've got recruiting stuff. I mean, I heard news of the week. So Kingston Fleming committed last weekend. I heard news over the weekend that if that happens soon, big potential recruiting news in basketball coming soon. And I'll leave that at that. Man, if that if that really happens, if what I heard could potentially be about to happen in basketball recruiting actually happens, we're talking like Fab Five. Like we're talking incredible. Anyway, if and when and how it all happens, we'll be breaking down here at Locked On Cougs each and every day. Locked On Cougs is primary of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, whether we're wearing red or blue, every day. Go Cougs.